This, Shannon, you'll see. Okay, go.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our 2020 KPDSB book study kickoff event for this year's book club selection, Jessie Thistle's From the Ashes. I'm Shannon Bailey. I'm Superintendent of Education with Keewatin-Patricia District School Board, and I'd like to begin tonight with the following. In the spirit of truth and reconciliation, we would like to acknowledge that we are gathered today on the customary and traditional lands of the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people of the territories in which we reside and are participating from today. We respectfully recognize their presence both in the past and the present as we commit to action, education, meaningful dialogue, and change. With this, we recognize the historical impact and the multi-generational effects that residential schools and oppressive laws have had on the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples in Canada. I also wish to acknowledge the heartache and despair that is being felt in the world today of the emotional and psychological impact of racism, where men, women, and children every day are being told through racist actions that they are not enough, that they are not seen, and that they are not valued, and that humanity is not something that applies to them. We begin a new opportunity this evening where through reading, discussing, asking questions, and challenging each other's thinking, we can renew our commitment to collectively make change together. It's my pleasure to begin tonight by introducing the author. Jessie Thistle was born in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. In 1979, he and his two brothers were removed from his family home and moved to Brampton, Ontario to be brought up by his paternal grandparents. During his late teens and 20s, Thistle struggled with addiction, homelessness, and served several brief stints in jail for petty theft. After an unsuccessful robbery attempt in 2006, Thistle turned himself into the police and entered a drug rehabilitation program. In 2012, he entered the undergraduate history program at York University. He is now a national representative for Indigenous homelessness for the Canadian Observatory on Homelessness and is a strong advocate for an Indigenous understanding of homelessness. From the Ashes was a 2020 Canada Reads finalist and has been 18 weeks at #1 on the Globe and Mail bestsellers, which explains why ordering 250 copies has been impossible. I read his book this past fall after KP teacher and friend Shannon Elliott sent it to me, knowing that it was up my alley. I became truly inspired when I heard Jessie speak on a panel at Inspire this past November, and I'm so excited and have the absolute honor to introduce him to 250 of our staff this evening. KPDSB, please meet Jessie Thistle.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? I'm sorry that you can't get your 250 copies. I know that they just did a 13th printing, and so you can get them now at Amazon or through Simon & Schuster. That's so bad. Yeah, it's been hard for people. I get emails all the time of shortages all across the country, and I'm like, I just wrote the thing. I can't supply it. So I try my best, right?
Well, these are good problems to have.
Yeah. It's better than no one reading it, right? Which is what I thought was going to happen when I first wrote it, but it became like this smash hit all over the country, and I'm very honored and thank you that anyone read it. I can see 7 people here, so at least 7 people on your call read it, so that's good for me, you know?
Well, we are very excited to begin discussing. We asked our staff to, we threw it out there, something, I mean, we're in the middle of a global pandemic. We have had a high level of engagement and learning over the past few months, like nothing we could have ever imagined. And when we put it out there to see if anyone might be interested in a book club, we watched over the course of 3 days the list grow larger and larger, and we're so happy, and we're more than happy to wait for copies to come. And like I said, I think these are great problems for you to have. So yeah. I'm going to start this evening. I do have a few copies, and I want to start by just reading a passage at the beginning of the book, and just with a little follow-up question. There's a poem just at the very beginning of the book called A Little Boy's Dream. And it goes like this. I had this tiny bag, had it since my family fell apart. It was red and blue with an Adidas logo on the side and a golden zipper, the zipper of all zippers. I had this tiny bag. I took it everywhere with me. When we moved with Dad, hopped out windows at night, when we ran and ran on to our next place. I had this tiny bag. Grandma asked me to unpack it, but I wouldn't do it. She asked me many times after that, but I kept it filled with all my things, tucked away under my bed. It had my old life. When I finally got the courage to get rid of it, I left it on my bed, then jumped out my window, down 2 stories, but the grass broke my fall. Why did you do that, baby boy? Grandma asked. Because I always dream of dying, I said, and I can't take it to heaven with me. So I'm just wondering if you could start by telling us this excerpt called A Little Boy's Dream. When did you realize, when did this little boy realize that it was time to share your story with others?
When did he realize? I don't think he has. He's probably trapped inside of me, happy that we don't have to jump out of windows anymore. That, you know, I'm not a midnight marauder like my dad. So I don't know. I'm an accidental author too. I didn't really intend to write a book. I just did well in school, and the Toronto Star came and did a story on me. And in the process, he asked, like, how did you get to university? After I won the Governor General and the Trudeau and the Vanier scholarship. And I said, well, if you want the truth, I actually robbed a store. And that's how I got to university. It started there. So, and then I was asked to write a book after the story came out in the newspaper by Simon & Schuster. And so I don't know. I don't know if, you know, if I was ready ever to write the book, but I knew it was something that had to be written, and very few people are lucky enough to have a publisher come to them and ask them to write their story. Usually it goes the other way around, and authors always hate me because they've spent years crafting their manuscripts and they have to shop them around. Didn't happen like that for me. And I actually wrote the book in 3 months in 2018. So it's been on the bestseller list 3 times longer than it took to write the book. And it was just all accidental. Like, I don't know, they say organic when something feels organic. And it all kind of just happened. And so here we are. I'm talking to you guys all about it. But that little boy inside, I don't know if he ever will be ready to share those stories, but I shared them anyway. So
Thank you so much.
yeah.
Thank you, Jesse. So I'm Michelle Parish, and I'm a student achievement teacher here at KPDSB. So I have the privilege of working with our staff across the whole board. I just want to give you and some of our participants a little bit of history of our book club, because we feel it's a bit of a special circumstance. So this is our 2nd year that we've offered the book club to all employees in our board. And that was an idea that was brought forward by our former director, Sean Monteith. And we actually started last year with Tanya Talaga's book, All Our Relations. And as well, we had a great response to that. So we tonight have employees from finance, human resources, the facilities team, information technology department, so all school-based staff, anyone who works in a school, our trustees, which one of them is joining us tonight to ask a question, and administrators. We also have a number of guest participants joining us from other organizations. So we feel we've, approached this from a very inclusive mindset. And like we said already, with 250 participants, it shows interest in your story, which is, you already have brought us to that the amazingness of that those early beginnings and how that journey, has ended up. But we also see that we're a culture of learning through that participation, and that we have our participants here on the Google Meet as well, running on our Google Chat, which is just buzzing to my right here. So it's a active learning group that is seeking new understandings and insight and broadening our perspectives. So I just want to mention a couple of things that are a bit of housekeeping, that our participants are on Twitter right now. So if anyone would like to tweet, you can tag Jesse at McChiffman. And you are a very active social media user.
Yeah. Maybe a little too much. Yeah.
So we encourage people to tag and use the hashtag KPDSB Pride and KPDSB Book Study. As well, on the Google chat, you can ask questions, which we will moderate and bring to the forum here after we're done with these 4 questions. So I will get started to ask our participants to ask their questions. So the first is John. Are you there, John? And Sarah. So John is a secondary teacher at Sioux North High School in Sioux Lookout. He was born in Thunder Bay. He's joined by his wife, Sarah, tonight, who is a member of our Rapid Response Northern Support Team. Did I have that right, Shannon? I did that. I ran the acronym through my mind. And John, would you go ahead?
Sure, yeah. My question, it's pretty difficult to sway a student from heading down the difficult path that you took. What would you say or do for the 15-year-old you that could have altered your course in life? Basically, how can we as caring adults best help students at risk?
Great question. Thanks, John. I think if someone would have shown interest in me, like, and stuck me on some hockey team or baseball team or something like that. I had a lot of energy. I'm 6'2". I was in great shape, especially back then. Maybe not so much now, but like when I was a kid, I just wanted someone to take an interest in me and to take me to sports. I can remember watching all like the wealthy kids around us going to hockey and playing shinny and stuff, and I just wanted to be like them, and or Mark Messier, and like that was my generation. And so I think a lot of my frustration as a young Indigenous kid was just, I realized that my grandfather was too old to really pay that kind of attention to me. And it was always just about work in our household. And so sports are really, really important for youth between like age 12 to about 16, because they get out there and they're building confidence and they're learning to be social, and they have a different set of friends than I did. My friends were all like older DJs and people that had their own cars and apartments and jobs. Well, I was like that when I was 15 years old. I was hanging out with 19, 20-year-old guys that were, should have been hanging out with 15-year-old kids, that's for sure. But they were giving me drugs, and then I just went down that path. So I think that could have been avoided if there was just some sort of like really good after school program that didn't cost a lot of money, and then within that there was great peer mentorship. So I've often thought about that. I should have been in the majors, man. So
Being involved in sport and just activity is really important to our board. And at some point, we'd love to share with you how we engage our kids in a hockey academy program that is really well appreciated by our students and families. Next, I'd like to introduce our second panelist. This is Marilyn Duncalf. So Marilyn is originally from Thunder Bay as well, like John. She's a long-term Red Lake resident and a first-time trustee with KPDSB. Marilyn's has been a member of our local Red Lake Area Friendship Center board here for more than a decade. And this is Marilyn's first book club. And I can't imagine that you're ever going to have a better experience, Marilyn. So I welcome you to the book club as well to this evening, and you can go ahead.
Thank you, Michelle. Hi, Jesse. I feel you've started to deal with my question in your earlier comments, but here it goes. I'm wondering what aspects of your personality or temperament do you believe provided you with the resiliency and grit to overcome what you have overcome and what you've ultimately accomplished and will continue to do so?
What aspects of my personality allowed me to That's an interesting question. So, like, I come from like a generation of rounders, right? Like, I'm 44 years old. I had a lot of people I ran the streets with. A lot of them are dead now. I'm like the last one that I know of. A couple of them have lived there, but they're in prison or whatever. And I always wondered, like, I get asked this quite a bit, like, how did you survive? And I think it was my ability to adapt. It's that simple. Where other people um, didn't, right? And for a long time, I felt really, really bad about that. When I came out of treatment, I had survivor's guilt. I looked around and all my friends were gone, and I still have it all the time now. And there was a lot of really horrible things that I did to survive. I was willing to do things that other people weren't. So they had a moral compass and they said, nah, I can't tell on them because they committed that murder because I live by the street code and I have morals. You don't, you're a rat, right? I did anything that I needed to do to survive. And so in that, I betrayed my morals. I betrayed the code that I was born into. And I did that because if the law got ahead of me, I would go to jail as a homeless Indigenous man. The police don't work too well for us. And so all throughout my time on the streets, I did really immoral things to adapt and survive when other people around me just wouldn't do those things and they just died. They just died. Or they were killed or so I don't know if that's a strength. I remember when I went through treatment, I was given a book called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And he was the only person that I had ever heard talk like that. He's like, I did really horrible things while I was in those camps to survive. And like that's what it was about. Your survival instincts kick in, and it's what you're willing to do to get through. And it took him many years to forgive himself for being among the immoral ones. And he said it in his book, those among us with morals just didn't survive. And so, people look at me like I'm some sort of hero, but like, I don't know. It's a very, I'm conflicted about that because like I only showed you guys the tip of the iceberg in that book of what actually happened. So you can imagine from the things that are in there what actually happened in my life, right? And so, yeah, I'd say that it was just I adapted when others couldn't, and I did what I had to do. So,
Thanks a lot, Jesse.
yeah. Hope you guys still read the book after that.
Well, I'm going to read a passage from the book, and for me, this was the one that stuck with me the longest after I was done reading. And I have a lot of thoughts that I connected to this after I read it. So I'm going to share it in bits and pieces with our book club tonight. Go, 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 he commanded in a frantic but hushed voice. Faster, Jesse, crawl faster. The more we wiggled forward, the more our bodies dented the tin walls. It sounded like thunder all around my head. I began to cry. I looked back and I could see Jerry pull the string closed. The grate slapped into one shot, perfect, just like Dad taught him. We covered our mouths to silence our breath, dust settling all around us. I could hear the front door burst open and footsteps stampede into the living room. Look at this, I heard one man say. The kitchen is full of trash. One voice stood out from the rest. I could tell he was in charge. Yep, just like the neighbor described, dope and children. Find them. A deep voice said from near the kitchen, they've been hacking up this turnip. They've got no food. A pair of black boots appeared in front of the vent, and someone bent down to look under the bed. It was a police officer. I could see his uniform past Jerry and Josh's bodies. Nothing in here, he said, as he shone his flashlight into the vent. Not possible, the voice in charge said. The lady next door watched him leave last night at 10:30, and the kids were inside. This means they're still here. Look harder. Jerry's arms were shaking as the pair of black boots readjusted in front of the vent. A radio chattered as Josh squirmed. The tin made a muffled knock under his arm. Wait a minute, the high voice said. I think they're in here. The front of the bench shifted as he dug his fingers under the grate and tried to pull. Jerry gritted his teeth and held it tight with all his might. They're in the vent, I can see them, but they've got it locked off somehow. I was shaking, and I could feel Josh was too. Dad is going to kill us, I thought. Josh began to cry. He was probably thinking the same thing. When I read that passage, I thought of the students that I've known in my career, and also those that I haven't really known their context and what it is that they go home to at night. And it's something that's stuck in my mind since I read that passage, that there's some students, we know their stories, and we know, well, we think we know what we can do to help support them and to comfort them, if nothing else. But it's the kids that we don't know that's their story. And I guess what I'd like to know is what you think that we can do as educators to support students living in those kinds of conditions of trauma. What was it that you needed from the adults who were around you, and did you get it?
Yeah, I think like when I was in grade school, for sure, I think there should have been trauma-informed teachers. Like back in the day, that didn't exist. And so I was misidentified as being slow, or that I couldn't read and write and stuff, and they just pushed me through. When really I had trauma, right? Like that's when that story is about when my dad abandoned us, and the police came in and apprehended me and my brothers, and and then like it wasn't good. Foster care wasn't good, especially to my brothers. And so when I was in school, when I got to kindergarten, I'd fight all the time. I was one of the bad kids, right? On the surface, it looked like I'm a little troublemaker and I didn't want to pay attention. I was just frustrated as hell. My grandpa was not very well. He abused us, but I think he was trying to just be. That's what he knew, and I don't think he was trying to hurt us. That was just what he knew, and then the trauma of what had happened. So if we would have had some sort of like, some sort of trauma-informed counselor early in like kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2, identifying like this troublemaker kid and trying to like offer support. I think that would have saved me in a lot of ways, and I'd have probably gotten a better education and felt good. And I don't know. It's a hard question, actually. I've thought about it a lot, you know. And again, sports, I think that early sports in a kid's life, access to those sports. So, I always wanted to play hockey, but it costs $5,000 a year to play. And the parent has to invest and be up at 6 a.m. on Saturdays. And, so I just didn't have any of that. So maybe some of that for kids,
Thank you. At the heart of our board's work is the motto, kids come first. And we do really try to bring that mindset of understanding what's happening behind behaviors that we might not be able to see. So that was an important reminder for us. Jocelyn is our next panelist, and she is an intermediate French teacher at Beaver Brae Secondary School in Kenora. So Jocelyn brings an interest in how French teachers can be allies in the push for multilingualism, especially for Indigenous languages and in a public school system that systemically prioritizes the 2 official languages of Canada. So she's looking forward to reading the book and has joined us tonight with her question.
Hi, Jesse. So my
Hi.
question, of course, it's about language. So how valuable is Indigenous language revitalization in the public school system? Do you have an opinion on this? If you do think it's valuable, how can schools best support Indigenous language revitalization, specifically in our public system?
I do. I think it's critical. I think the project of Linguicide over 150 years through indoctrination of Indigenous kids in residential schools in the 60s and day scoop and all that stuff. That was a conscious effort to destroy language, right? And they've admitted that now. And so we need to invest as a country in some of our Indigenous languages. I don't know if we'll ever get to cover all of them, but whatever region you were in, like I think up around there is Anishinaabe, you should be teaching that in school alongside French. I don't think that you should stop teaching French and then offer the other. I think they both need to be, because they're both languages of this land, right? Along with English. And so, and that takes a lot of investment from the province, I guess, and then a commitment by Ottawa too, to revitalize these languages, because like the amount of money that was spent into destroying them, we should have that much time and money spent on rebuilding them on the other side. And those languages will tell you things about the different regions in which you live, because they're like coded, they're like code books, eh? Like Anishinaabe will tell you stuff about the rocks and the trees and the animals that you can't get from French or English. So it's actually advantageous for all people in Canada to speak an Indigenous language, because it's of the land. It's incorporeal to this place. And yeah, I wish someone would be, you know, in Saskatoon could teach me Michif, you know, again, and revitalize that. There's only 400 speakers left of my ancestral language. And there's kind of grief that comes from that when something like that dies, that's different than like any other kind of loss. It's almost like end of an era, end of a cultural era, you know. And I see a lot of my elders are really, really afraid of that, because the young ones aren't taking it up, because there's no school initiatives. I know that some places in like Toronto is starting to do it, but I don't know if you guys are doing Anishinaabe classes there, but they're needed. They're needed, you know. And it's not just for the Indigenous kids too. For all kids, they all should have to do it.
Thank you. And you provided a perfect segue into our next panelist. Jana is an avid northerner, in that she loves to spend time outside with her family and friends. She's a teacher at Valley View Public School in Kenora. She works with our special education students, has a real appreciation for her role and spot within our board, and has experience as an educator in grades 4 to 9, but brings that lens of taking care of some of our students who need us most.
Hi, Jesse.
Hello.
My question today is, it's that time of year where we're getting ready for graduation, and we've heard from a lot of speakers across the globe. And my question for you is actually, if you had one thing that you could say to the graduating class of 2020, what would it be?
What would it be? Congratulations, first of all, I would say. Monumental achievement, not only for you, but for all of the people that have supported you and helped you on your path. And then when you get out there, have the courage to try. Don't follow the money. If you run after the money, life doesn't work out too well. Go after what you love with what you've learned. And from that will come all the money, all the happiness, all the contentment. You know, and my wife Lucy taught me that, and I live by that every day. So
that's good. You've reminded us of many things that are important to our board tonight. I'm quickly going to say trauma-informed practices, empathy, believing in our students, encouraging each other, learning, the importance of language. We do have a question from the Google chat, which is, do you think you might end up being an accidental author again soon? Can we be anticipating another publication from you?
yeah. Do they work for Simon & Schuster? No? Okay. I just have to ask, right? Legally. No, I do have another book, actually. My great uncle Ronnie, in the book, he was actually a professional bank robber in Toronto in the 70s and 80s. And his story is a lot more dramatic than mine. It's going to be a way better book, but it's also sadder in a lot of ways because his life is a product of a place called Spanish Residential School in Spanish, I think, Espanola. And so, yeah, there's just some damage that happened to Indigenous boys that happened. And he carried that with him the rest of his life, and to retake his power and agency and his masculinity, became the most masculine, most hype. No one tells a bank robber what to do, right? And so that's what he became. He inflicted upon the state the violence that was inflicted upon him. And so, and why I'm writing this story, I have to fictionalize it, of course. I don't want to get in trouble with his friends, that's for sure. It's because he's in Joyceville. He's been DO'd. He's a dangerous offender because he just robbed so many places. They don't know what to do with him. And it's an expression of the out of control incarceration rates of Indigenous peoples across the country. Is that it's actually an expression of trauma. It's actually intergenerational trauma. And that's why these young people, or people like my great uncle, are so frustrated and turned into, what the state made them into. And I'm not condoning his behavior. And I'm not saying what he did was right. I'm just showing the links between the historic and contemporary phenomenons. And I've already signed. I can't wait to get this book out there. And I do have a historical book coming out about Métis intergenerational trauma. So my family fought at Patoche with Louis Riel, the Northwest Resistance, and what that trauma did over time was eventually led to things like my homelessness, my addiction issues, and I traced that all through time. So I got 2 books coming out, plus my dissertation, so no pressure, right?
Those are some lofty goals,
Yeah.
but exciting for us as the readership of those. I'm wondering, sort of on the theme of writing and learning, if you could talk to us, and I'd follow all of your social media, and I think that's part of your story that is so intriguing to me, and so I think that is what makes your story very heroic, is the pathway that you've taken since entering undergraduate studies in 2012. Maybe you could describe to our book club this evening kind of your pathway since then, and your pathway to being an associate professor now.
Okay, sure, yeah. I started university in 2012, just a construction worker, had lots of physical issues. When you read the book, you'll know what I'm talking about. I couldn't read very well, and so I went there and I was afraid. I was like 35 years old, starting to bald. I'm an old man, and I couldn't read very well. And when I got in there, I was terrified because all the kids were way smarter than me, faster, they knew more, better supported. And I just applied the things that I'd learned in rehab about time management and applying myself and really facing my fear, right, of not being able to read and properly. And I stuck it out that first year, and I really, really read every article like 3 and 4 times till it made sense, and I made notes. And what was happening is that I started to outwork all the other students around me, because I just had better work ethic. I'd get up at 4:30 in the morning. I'd study literally 12 to 16 hours a day, every day, never take a holiday off, never take a day off, read every word. And I realized that I was doing this because I had a different reason for being in school than the kids did around me. They were there because they thought that's what was expected of them, to go through the motions and graduate and then get out into the work world. Where I went because I was trying to not die, basically. It was like my survival strategy to better myself. I wanted to be something more than an illiterate criminal, homeless crack addict. And so I just tried and tried, and I started to hit my stride, and then I started taking Indigenous history courses to figure out why I was so broken for so many years and figure out my family history. And in that course, I met some really generous scholars who flew me back west to meet my mom and my mom's family and reconnect with my Métis Cree roots out there. And I was terrified. I thought I was going to get rejected when I went out. And when I landed and went to my uncle's house, they had a lawn chair beside the barbecue, empty, waiting for me like I'd never left, you know. And they gave me a hamburger and they didn't even make a big deal out of it. Of course, they hugged me. And so that brought me back into my culture, back into my circle. And I started rebuilding my connection with my mom. And I realized we have a really cool history out there. We're like the rebel Métis people that like went to war with Canada. That's pretty dramatic, right? And it's tied to our national narrative with Rial. You know, we're like vive la resistance. And I recorded all these stories. I started going and listening to all the elders, and then I transcribed it, and then I wrote this all down. And it was a very cathartic experience. And because I was there just to figure myself out, I was really, really interested in doing that work, which made me a better researcher than even like seasoned professors who'd been in the field for many years. And I just started getting really, really good grades after that because I kept focusing on Métis history and trauma and Cree history. And then I graduated the very top of my class in 2016. While I was doing that, I was also working at a place called the Homeless Hub. And I was a ghostwriter for other homeless people that were trying to tell their stories. And while I was working there, Stephen Gates and Allison Marcellet, they're the people that run the Homeless Hub, noticed that I was an excellent writer from all the training that I was teaching myself. And they hired me to write what's called the definition of Indigenous homelessness in Canada, which has gone on to articulate Indigenous homelessness as like a disconnection from healthy social relations. And this revolutionized in many ways the homeless sector across Canada. I was just an MA. I didn't even know the impact of my work. And I was just basing it off my own experiences and talking to other people who are Indigenous, who had been homeless. And just, I asked them what homelessness is, and they told me, and I wrote it down. So for me, it was not that revolutionary, but it changed things. And then that brought me to a whole different level. I won all these awards, and now people start listening to me and think I'm actually, I think, smarter than I am, you know. And I just continued to go. Like every opportunity that I got into my master's. I did that in 8 months. Then I got to my PhD. I did all my coursework and everything like a year and a half, and then I wrote the book in 3 months. And that's where I am now. And so it's really a short amount of time that all this has happened, this new life of mine. So that's how I became what I am now. You know, I don't know if that's the answer you're looking for.
Oh, that's great. I think that there's such hope in the story that follows your book. And I think it's an interesting perspective for our group to have before they go and read, and then they think backwards in time. And I mean, that is a lot of success you just described. And when you read the story and you connect, I think that was when we were sitting in the crowd in Inspire, I was just stunned to connect those two stories together, because I don't know that there's a lot of people that have the strength that you had to overcome your story from the ashes to your story of who you are now. So it's really inspiring. And I think it brings a lens of hope to, we know we have students that struggle and, like you said, live in these intergenerational situations of various kinds. And we always think about, is there anything that we can do to help support them that can break that cycle for them, and they can grow from that experience into something really positive. And to have a role model like yourself, it's really inspirational. And I think it makes all of the hard work really worthwhile, and feels like there's possibility on the other end of it. So I really appreciate sharing that with us.
Oh, thank you. And if I had to put it down to one ingredient, I would say like love. I know that sounds really cliche or cheesy, but the like love of self, and then beyond that, like I learned that in rehab, the love of community that wrapped around me that made it possible. This was not a instance of me pulling up my bootstraps and like getting on with life. This was my wife supporting me, editing every paper that I wrote. This is Carolyn Padruchny, that scholar. She's the one who flew me back to Saskatchewan to meet my family. This is like York University wrapping around me, and Inspire itself giving me money so that I could go through university and see that I was worthy of love and all these things. So yeah, it's love and trust. And really, I think the true hero from my book is Lucy. She's the real hero. You know, she's the one who gave me a place when I got out of rehab. And, you know, I don't know, she must have been crazy though. Think about it. Like I just got out of jail and I had like this addiction, and I remember our friends were telling her, don't have this man around, you know, he's not trustworthy. And she proved them all wrong, you know, so yeah.
I love how you've brought out specific people that have impacted your life. And I think, you know, we can all speak to those different individuals who have really touched our own journeys. And so I'm just, we have another question from the chat about those individuals that are involved in the wraparound support. So, you know, you ended up working at the homeless shelter after you were going to school and collecting and recording stories. But throughout your book, you speak of the different times that you accessed the shelter and drug addiction centers. And we know that these wraparound supports exist for our students. What are some ways that we can work effectively with them and bring them on board for the most you know, love and hope to come into our children's lives here at school?
And you guys are teaching like high school kids, or like, is this middle school?
Right, K to 12.
K to 12, okay. Well, I think like in high school, there should be mandatory drug testing. Not for kids, not like you don't make them pee in a cup, but what they should have is a place that they can come and test the drugs that they're doing, right? This existed back in Toronto in the 90s for raves, and it saved lives, lots of lives. And this climate of addiction is a lot worse than when I was coming up. There's fentanyl now. And so not having these safe testing sites where kids are going to use anyways, you're dooming certain kids to overdose. You really are. And I know that's a hard truth to think about, but within the school, I think there should be some sort of mechanism, maybe in the guidance counselor's office, or where they can come and test whatever drugs that are available. And that sounds that'll be a hard sell, right, politically, but ultimately it will save lives. And so that's one thing that you can do. Then you can have like a place where kids can have like access to peer mentorship of a little kids that are a little older and a little more successful, like in university, and so that they can dream and they can have pathways out of wherever they are. That makes a big difference. I saw programs like that at York University, where we set up seniors with like new freshmen that come in and walk them through some of the steps of how to like navigate the systems. So that should exist in high schools, I believe. You know, I think the university kids should go in there, maybe have a co-op program for teaching that has like these university students that want to be teachers that come in and help kids learn and navigate the system. And then beyond that, I think that high schools have a responsibility to teach real things to children. And what I mean by that is like have classes where they can build credit, start a bank account, you know, learn those kind of basic life skills. When I was in school, I don't know what it's like. They had nothing like that. And I went into the world and I tried to rent apartments and rooms. And because I had no credit or bank account, I couldn't do any of those things. And they're really important. That's more important than a lot of things that are taught. And I'm not bashing in curriculum or anything, but like, let's add that in there too, you know, because those are life skills that you need. And some kids don't have the parents to teach them those things. Like my wife's mom taught her all those things when she was in high school, and she was okay by the time she went to university. I didn't get any of that, you know, and that would have helped me at least rent a room or whatever, you know. So those are practical things, I know. But
Thank you so much. We have such a conversation going in a back channel right now. It's hard to be able to speak on behalf of all of the staff and all of the great comments that are coming up right now. I wonder what you think is, like, you talked a lot about some practical examples of things in secondary. We have a lot of elementary educators too that are on this evening and in a variety of roles. And I think that I'd be interested to know that, as like we've covered this in a couple other areas, but if thinking about the advice that you just gave to our secondary schools, besides athletics, what are the things, like the whether it's personality traits or like, I think, what are the things that can engage kids in challenging circumstances into learning that might be a little outside of the box?
yeah, that's a great question. You can trick them and bribe them with taking them outside on the land. All kids love that, right? Say, let's go for a nature walk. And then in that, you can have like an elder program that links them up with the kids and teaches them, you know, this is what a tree is. This is what, that's a bear, a mukwa. And you can teach language that way. I went on a really cool walk like that in Yukon. I'm a Trudeau scholar. And so a lot of that's experiential, going out onto the land. And they do that with kids up there. And those kids love it more than going to school, actual school. And so, yeah, if you take them out on the land and have an elder show them like the things that are there and the teachings that are involved, that the legends, you know, all those different things, the folklore of that area, it goes a long way with creating not only a healthy relationship with elders, but also a healthy relationship with the land, where they start to respect it and know it in a different way. And I think it's a really exciting time, because like there are certain schools that are already doing this. And I don't know if you guys are doing that with your youth, but it's an opportunity to, you know, get them out and exercise and teach them about the natural world, and teach a little science, a little, you know, anthropology, a little language, all that stuff. So
I think it's really it's validating to hear that opinion. We have a lot of informal outdoor and land-based learning opportunities, I think more than ever now, but we also have a couple more formalized programs. We have a couple forest school programs where the learning throughout the day takes place through every season and every weather condition that you can think of. So I think that that's really inspiring to continue to look for ways to bring learning outside and to see where learning can emerge from the outdoor environment. I also like the connection that you've made to elders, because I think that that we see great success in those relationships and those connections that our students can build. So thank you so much for that.
yeah, there's a program. Have you guys ever heard of Evergreen Brickworks in Toronto? Well, there's a program. My wife used to work there, and they'd have kids go and do like a medicine garden. So they plant tobacco, they plant cedar, they plant all the different medicines, as well as a vegetable garden. you'd be surprised at how interested kids are in like learning how potatoes and tomatoes and beans and all those things grow, right? It's almost novel now because a lot of kids don't know that, right? And so I remember Lucy telling me a story about how the kids didn't know where French fries came from. They all love French fries, but they had no clue that they came from potatoes. And it was through this program that they built a relationship to the potato, and they came to a deeper understanding of what French fries are. And that's kind of cool, you know? So just another example of that.
Mhm. And that's actually just a perfect way to head into our last question, because we are going to talk a little bit about teachers and specifically those academic supervisors that took you under their wing when you arrived at university and began to learn. So one of the questions here says the impact of the relationships with your academic supervisors in helping you to continue to succeed, but also to overcome that feeling of illiteracy or comparing yourself to other students. Can you talk a little bit about those people and their role in your journey?
Sure. Yeah, I met Dr. Victoria Freeman in my second year at university, and I took Aboriginal history courses with her. And in the class, she got everybody to do an assignment to contextualize their family history within Canadian colonization. So she's just like, how did your family get here? How did you get here? What does your last name mean? And then trace that back through time. And what that does is it offers positionality in why you're in the classroom to begin with. And I studied my family out west. I learned about our history as Métis bison hunters, but other students in the class were Somali, and they learned about their family history and, you know, Italian colonization that happened there. Other people were from England, other people, India, all over the world. And then we had to stand up and share these stories in front of each other. And what we found is that we all arrived in that classroom by similar mechanisms of colonization. You know, even though our stories are all different from all across the world, even some generations of Canadians that were been here for like 6 generations, there were similar themes of dispossession, loss of language, loss of homeland, all these things, religious persecution, all these things existed. And so we saw that in this colonial project, we're actually a lot more similar than we are different, even though on the surface it looks like we're more different. And so I learned who I was and my position in Canada from Dr. Victoria Freeman. And her friend is Dr. Keewatin-Patricia. She's an expert in Métis history. And so that paper that I wrote in that class was sent to Carolyn, and she took me under her wing. And Carolyn knew right away that I was interested in history more than just like writing papers. And I was really, really invested in finding who I was out and the meaning of what it meant to be Indigenous. And so she took me under her wing. And when she did that, she really did. Like she saw that I didn't have money one summer. She hired me as an RA to do transcribing. Next summer, saw that I didn't have money again. She hired me to build her this cedar garbage thing on the side of her house that she didn't need. She just hired me so that she could justify giving me money. And she did this all the way through university. And then what she did is she started flying me all over the country to talk at different conferences. And I don't know if she ever recouped that money or what happened, but like she did that out of her own pocket, I think, you know, just to get me out there and so people knew who I was. And she also connected me back to my community. And then when she realized that there were other elders and other knowledge keepers that were Indigenous from my people that were there, she knew when to let go as well. She knew when her role as like someone that was holding me up was over. And she let my community bring me in and teach me our ways. Beyond that, they made me into a scholar. Like I'm an invention of Keewatin-Patricia. What she did is every class I was in, she submitted one of my papers for an essay prize, every one. And so at the end of my undergrad, it looked like I had all these awards, right? I won like so many awards, but it's not because I'm a great writer. It's because the frequency of how many applications for different awards she sent out. And some of those awards was only me on the docket, I'm sure, and I won by default. But people don't know that from the outside, right? And she kept doing this over and over. And she's like, hey, with your high grade point and all these awards, you should apply for the Trudeau and the Vanier and all these big awards. And I didn't know that they even existed. So because of her institutional knowledge and how to navigate all these different prestigious things, she put me in positions that turned me into a successful scholar. And without her or Victoria Freeman, I probably would be working at Walmart right now. I don't know, not that Walmart's bad, I shop there. So I'm just saying, like, I'm an invention of her and her mentorship.
I would argue that you're not a good writer.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so we have a few minutes left, and we thought it would be a good lighthearted way to end with a few rapid fire questions, just so that our group can get to know you just a little bit different. So nothing heavy, just a few lighthearted questions. So I'm going to start. And the first thing is, tell us what makes you calm.
Makes me calm? My cat. Poppy cat. She usually comes up here. She's very rude and she scratches me, but she's all right. She tolerates me,
All right, Jesse, what is your secret food indulgence?
My secret food is always spaghetti and meatballs. So I've been eating that my whole life. And I don't know why. There used to be this weird cartoon when I was a kid called Spaghetti and Meatballs. I don't know if anybody remembers that from the 70s. And so I've liked it ever since then, even now. So
Who do you admire most?
who do I admire most? Probably my wife. We're doing IVF right now, and she's got to take all these crazy drugs in her stomach. And yeah, my wife. Yeah.
What are you reading right now, Jesse?
What am I reading? Oh, the last thing I read actually is this book. These two books. Every school should have them. What they are is the complete compendium of Indigenous Crown treaties in Canada. And so this is how Canada got the land, all in here. And it's in the words of the actual treaties. So you can read them in full there. And with those, like I just did a lecture for Brampton. I read the Brampton Treaty to City Council for the first time, I think, ever. They don't recognize the treaty, so I forced them to, damn it.
That's awesome. I hope all our administrators are putting that on their purchase lists. Okay, favorite movie or TV quote?
My favorite movie? It's not a movie. My favorite thing to watch is Sopranos. I love Sopranos. I don't know why. It's just the dialogue in it. If you're a writer, it's the best dialogue that's been ever been written. And my favorite quote, what we do now, it echoes in eternity. I'm like a big Russell Crowe Gladiator fan, So
Awesome.
yeah.
And our last rapid fire question, if you could let us know what your pet peeve is, or a few of them are.
My pet peeve? One of them is when I'm talking on the phone. Like, we have this dog Willow beside that always barks, and I'm surprised she didn't bark tonight. And so Willow, the German Shepherd, really bothers me. And so one of my pet peeves. Another one is when people ask me about my book, why isn't there more Indigenous stuff in it? And I'm like, the whole book is about an Indigenous guy, me. So that seems to be enough, But they're talking about performance with like feathers and beads and fur and all that stuff. It's not the 17th century. We don't live like that anymore. So, yeah.
All right. So the last, it might not be a quick answer, but a final thought that you have for 250 of your new best friends.
Oh, well, I hope one of you guys, when I come up there, take me out for spaghetti and meatballs, and I'll be expecting that when I come up there. So
And a fishing trip, of course.
yes, of course, yeah, for sure. I'm a city native, so I'm not very good at camping. I kind of glamp, but I try. I try.
Too. Awesome. Well, I just want to do a few final thank yous before we wrap up tonight. I want to thank our panelists, John, Marilyn, Jocelyn, and Jana. Thanks for submitting your questions. And thanks to all of the staff who were sending us questions through our Google chat. And those questions that we didn't get to this session, we look forward to meeting with Jessie again at the end of our book club, and we'll be able to have some of those as part of our conversation then. I want to thank my co-moderator, Michelle, for all of her planning and hard work, as well as helping to moderate the questions tonight. Thanks to Brian Beal, our Learning Technology Manager, for his support in getting this session set up tonight. I want to thank our Director of Education, Sherry Lynn Farrand, for her support in putting this book club together and her participation in it tonight as well. And lastly, Jessie, you have provided us with such an exciting opportunity tonight. You're humble, you're reflective, and so kind to have spent some time with us when we know how busy you are. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit more of your story and giving us so much to think about. And we really look forward to our opportunity that we'll have a few weeks from now to meet again and to talk a little bit more in depth about your book, and just to think about all of the things that we learn from reading your story. So thank you so much from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you. Can I say one thing?
Absolutely.
You guys are going to rent a little space in your head for my book, right? And you're going to spend a little time with me. So thank you for letting me do that. And I'm always honored that anybody read my book. Like literally, you'll know what I mean, the place that I came from. So it's just amazing that you'll even take the time. So thank you very much. And thanks for organizing this. It's truly the honor is mine to come and speak with you wonderful people.
Awesome, thank you. Well, and I'm sure you'll have a lot of people tagging you on social media and presenting their thoughts out to the World Wide Web on all of the epiphanies that we have as we move through your text. So until we meet again, thank you so much for your time, and thank you to everyone for participating tonight. And I hope you all have a great evening.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Take care. Bye.
Are we off, Brian?